Welcome to the Spotlight on Sherborn Business. I'm Dave Sorter, member of the Sherborn Business Association and an owner of the Sherborn Inn. Today, the Spotlight is on Paul Saulnier, owner of CIVILized Solutions, a civil engineering firm dedicated to the construction of septic systems. Paul is knowledgeable in all phases of waste disposal systems, but is widely known in this area for his design and development of septic systems for houses. He has dedicated his specialty in civil engineering to this specialty. His knowledge of the rules and regulations governing disposal systems, septic systems, and the local boards make him a highly respected resource in Sherborn and surrounding towns. Welcome to this program, and I'm anxious to ask Paul many questions that I have had over the many years that I've known him. First of all, Paul, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Dave. It's great to be here.
How long have you been in practice, and where do you practice, and how do those needing your services get to you?
Well, I've been in practice since 1970. I graduated from Northeastern, and actually that first year I designed my first septic system for a facility in Maine. And I've been doing other things besides septic system design for all these years. But in 1995, when the state changed their regulations and really standardized septic design rules, then I started to concentrate on septic systems, and that's probably 95% of my work since. I'm in the phone book, not as CIVILized Solutions, but just as me personally, Paul Saulnier, out of Holliston. And I'm also on the list that the various boards of health in Sherborn and surrounding towns have, so people can contact me that way as well.
One thing, do architects contact you, or developers, or is it mainly word of mouth by residents?
Well, architects and developers are typically new construction, and probably 90–95% of my work is for design and replacement of failed systems. So very rarely do I get referrals from architects and builders. It's mostly from either homeowners who have just found out that their system didn't pass a Title V inspection, and they'll talk to other people that have had similar problems, and my name will come up. Or they will, like I say, go to the Board of Health and ask for a list.
Okay, before we get further into this discussion, I have a question that I've had on my mind for many years. 25 years ago, I visited the palace at Knossos on the Greek island of Crete in the Minoan Empire. At that time, I was very interested in waste disposal systems because the Board of Health was giving me quite a time developing the Sherborn Inn. I felt as though the palace had a very interesting waste disposal system. Slaves would carry the water up to the top of the hill on which the palace was built. They'd pour the water into a cistern, and at certain times during the day, the water would be trickled out, down through the trenches, through the palace, and out the back door into a septic field, I guess. That's what you call it. I just don't think things have progressed too far since 5,000 years ago. Am I wrong? Or is this basically still the design of septic systems?
Well, interesting question. I would say the first difference that comes to mind is that the slaves are better paid.
I see.
But really, that system probably, although it flushed the wastewater away from the palace, it was probably discharging it in the groundwater, maybe to a local stream. And of course, we know better now. And the systems are designed not to do that, to treat the wastewater before it gets out. And now the state has allowed what they call innovative alternative systems, which really pre-treat the water, much like a wastewater treatment plant that's currently being funded by the Charles River Watershed Association to study the downtown in Sherborn. So you can do that in your own home and provide that kind of level of treatment now.
Well, thank you for answering that question. I've had that on my mind for 25 years, and now it's answered. Getting that question out of the way, could you describe the process of designing and developing a septic system in our homes or in our region?
Okay, sure. First of all, the first thing that happens is the homeowner gets the bad news that they've failed a Title V inspection, which means that the system isn't functioning or is in the groundwater or some other problem. The homeowner will then either check with the Board of Health to get a list of engineers and I'm on that list. Or they might check with a neighbor or a friend who's gone through a similar problem and get my name that way. On occasion, I'll get a reference from a realtor, or maybe even a septic system pumper or an installer that a homeowner might know. And that's how I get involved.
Well, once you've been engaged, where do you start with soil testing or permitting? How does this whole process work?
Well, the first step really is to meet with the homeowner and look at the property and find out if they have any future ideas about the property. Maybe they want to put a pool over here or a garage over there. So that sort of eliminates areas of consideration for the replacement. The other thing is to find out where that existing system is and then talk to the homeowner about maybe picking an area that's in a different spot that maybe doesn't involve trees, that wouldn't look so bad if in fact there is a mound that results. So that's really the first step. And then it's to come in with a backhoe, do what's called the soil testing. In Sherborn, we're required to dig 3 holes 10 feet deep, and that determines the type of soil down to 10 feet and make sure there's no ledge involved. Then there's the so-called perk test, which is a hand-dug hole. You pour water into it and you measure how fast that goes down. That determines the size of the system. And then to locate the seasonal high groundwater, which determines whether the system's going to be out of the ground or not.
Do you have to do this testing at a certain time of the year?
Sherborn has a requirement that you test between November 1st and April 30th, which is the time of year when the groundwater is the highest and you have a better chance of determining where the seasonal high groundwater is. But on a system that's failed a Title V inspection, the board waives that requirement in order to get a system in sooner and get the wastewater treated and then better protect the environment.
Tell us how a septic system works. What happens when you flush something down the toilet, for example?
Well, and if the system is properly designed, the first thing you get is a septic tank that's a large enough capacity, and so you get a separation there, and the outlet from that tank is baffled or teed so that only the clear water comes out, goes into what's called a distribution box, and then from there the water is spread out over a series of what's called trenches, and the water is disposed of in the soil. The soil takes out some of the nitrogen, gives the bacteria a chance to eat the carbon-based materials that are still in the wastewater. And then there's a separation there between the bottom of the trenches and the high groundwater, where as the water drains through, the air gets at the bacteria and the viruses and they die off. So you get a relatively well-treated wastewater that then enters the groundwater environment.
I understand you have some film here that perhaps can describe the construction of a septic system. Is that correct? Do you have some film?
Yeah, I think we've got some tape here that we can run,
okay.
And maybe I can explain. Right here is a typical septic tank going in on a replacement septic system. This particular tank is 1,500 gallons, which is the minimum size allowed under the Title V state regulations. So that drops in, the pipe from the house gets connected to it, the cover gets put on, and then at this end is the outlet end. You can see that little 4-inch hole. The pipe from there goes to what we call the distribution box, and then it's put in these trenches. Here's an example of a trench that's been dug, and you can see at the top of the screen there that black plastic trench. That holds the wastewater, and then it's covered over with a special Title V rated sand, as it's been done in this scene here. And then the system is backfilled and covered up, topsoil is put on, and the lawn is planted, or you put a garden over it, whatever it is you're going to do. This shows those plastic chambers again being installed. When you use these plastic chambers, the state feels that they're much better than the old stone and pipe systems, so they give you actually a 40% reduction in the size of the system that otherwise would be required. And you can see they're fairly easy to install as well, so that saves a lot on labor and material costs.
How do you know how much piping to put in? How do you determine the size of this field?
Well, that's all a factor on the site, how many bedrooms a particular house has. Here's an example of a system that because the groundwater is slightly out of the ground, so we have to build a retaining wall around the system to keep the soil in and to meet what's called breakout. This particular one is near a property line, so when you get close to property lines, you have to build retaining walls. And some of them are much higher than that. Some of them are as much as 4 feet high.
Is there a life expectancy to a septic tank and a septic field? Is there?
Well, the septic tanks probably will last almost forever. The leach fields in the past have lasted anywhere from 20 to 50 years. The word is that the new design requirements, systems will last 75 years, but only time will tell since it's only been since '95.
All right, so just recoup the testing system. What basically has to be done to set the system up? Is just soil testing and then the permitting process?
Yeah, basically, especially in Sherborn, the first thing you have to do once you've identified a failed system is let the Conservation Commission know through an application and a $120 fee, and they will decide whether you're within their jurisdiction, within 100 feet of wetlands, or maybe even in an area that's sensitive, not necessarily near a wetland. They will hopefully then say, yeah, it's okay to go ahead. They'll tell the Board of Health that it's okay to go ahead. And then we'll schedule a soil test. The Board of Health agent comes out and we'll bring a backhoe in and do these test holes. Once the test holes are done and the holes are backfilled, the next step is to do a topographic survey. And then once I have that base plan, then I can design a system. And usually I'll look at a couple of alternatives, including the innovative alternative ones, to give the homeowner the opportunity to decide whether, if it's a mound, do they want a mound, or if it's not a mound, do they want an alternative system, and are they willing to live with the consequences of an alternative system? Because there are some state requirements that go along with that as well.
You were talking about recovery, and you were talking about redoing systems that have failed. What are the signs of a failed system? And I heard that you might have some film regarding a failure.
I think we have some film here that's available. But I think most homeowners, here's what we call breakout, where it's gone long enough that the wastewater now can't go down or sideways, so it comes up through the topsoil and then kind of makes a mess of the yard. That's a really bad example. Most homeowners will first notice that the grass is greener over the leach field, kind of like what Irma Bomback said. If it's properly designed and functioning, you won't see that. But that's the first step, first sign that the system is failing. Then pretty soon that area over the leaching field gets spongy, especially in the spring. And then the next thing you know, the lawnmower gets stuck in it and you've got a serious problem on your hands. The other thing is that internally, a homeowner might notice that the tub doesn't drain as fast as it used to, or sometimes if you've got a slop sink in the basement, you'll see water come up on that one when you run the washing machine or something like that.
I see. But the life expectancy of a tank, you say a septic tank may be a long, long time.
Indefinite, yeah.
The life expectancy of a septic system itself has a very definite life expectancy of 25 to 50 years.
It begins to fail the first time you flush the toilet, basically.
Yeah. When you need a new septic system, can you use the space between the old pipes for a new leaching bed, or do you have to have a brand new field to?
Well, it's an interesting question, actually, because under the 78 rules, systems that were designed installed since 78 were far enough apart that you could put replacement trenches in between those old ones. But in '95, they changed the rules so much that that area is not adequate anymore. So, but we always try to put the septic system in a different area because the current area is considered hazardous material, and it's much more expensive to remove it and replace it. So it's better to go somewhere else, let that system dry out, and over the course of about 6 months, it'll go just back to natural soil.
Are there newer methods of waste disposal systems now that are being employed by developers or cluster developments or individual houses?
Well, certainly for cluster and major developments, like maybe what's proposing or what's being studied for downtown, there are wastewater treatment plants. And those have been improved over the years. But for the homeowner, the state has allowed what's called an innovative alternative technology. And in effect, you're providing about 95% treatment of the wastewater as opposed to a standard system, which is 60%. And as a result, the state lets you put it closer to groundwater, lets you build smaller systems. And the result is, if you're in a mounding situation on your particular lot, you can save about 4 feet a mound. You might also be able to save some trees because the systems are smaller.
Do you have to have an engineer present for the wastewater disposal systems, or do they operate pretty much by themselves?
Yeah, the ones designed for homeowners are self-operating. The state does require, though, that the manufacturer of the system come out and check it twice a year and report to the homeowner, to the Board of Health, and to the state. And there's probably 150, 200 of them in Sherborn right now operating that way, and I'm not aware of any of them that have ever failed the testing results.
Before we end this conversation, I would like you to summarize your business, septic systems in general. Just give us a summary of what you really do and how these systems really function.
Okay, well, thank you. In Sherborn, wastewater disposal is particularly of concern because everybody also has a well. And Sherborn has its own set of rules that are much more stringent to protect those wells. But as I described earlier, meeting with the homeowner and talking about the alternatives is very important. I can be reached through my email address, which is civilized@aol.com. And I also do wells. On occasion, homeowners' wells will fail, so I can design a location for a new well. And sometimes a new well is required just because a septic system has failed and there's no place other than to put it, other than where maybe it's too close to the existing well and a well has to be replaced. So we look at all of those things. I've been doing septic systems, as I said, since 1970, and I probably do 20 or 25 a year in Sherborn alone. So I've got plenty of experience, and I'm ready to apply it to the residents of Sherborn.
Well, it certainly has been a very interesting discussion for me, because I think that the septic systems in Sherborn are very important, and the Board of Health and everybody else holds these as our primary design for preventing pollution of our wells and so on. And I think that this discussion has probably raised a lot of questions in people's minds, and I'm sure you'll probably get some telephone calls regarding other problems, but I think you've given a very complete discussion, and I really thank you, Paul, for being here.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, and my phone is always ready to speak to anybody from Sherborn who has a question.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Paul. I think that this has been very beneficial for me and for everyone in Sherborn and whoever else watches this program. But this program is produced for the benefit of our residents in Sherborn mainly by the Sherborn Business Association and the Dover-Sherborn Cable TV. Until next time, this is Dave Sorter from the Sherborn Inn, and bye.